maybe I shouldn't bring it up, but special card because
Yeah.
this man right over here going to be in attendance, going to
Yes,
get us
sir.
that in-person perspective on the fights. So yeah, that and Mike Perry's fighting on the card. It's a huge weekend. I'm excited, man.
Yeah, I get to see Mike Perry live. Um,
Yeah, try to say hey for me.
oh yeah, I'll try. Yeah, there's gonna be a meet and greet, which is pretty cool, man. A lot, well, not all the, but a lot of the American Top Team guys are gonna be there for meet and greets. Usman, Poirier. I don't know. Does Usman train American Top Team actually, or does he train?
Yeah, man, I should know where Usman trains. I don't.
I think he trains in Boca. I don't know if he trains at Coconut Creek.
Okay.
But they got Poirier, Joanna I can't say her name. I never can.
Yeah, Joanna and Jacek.
Yeah, Jacek. Yes.
It's a tough one, man. I remember Mike Goldberg almost having a seizure on live air trying to say it. So
I
yeah,
literally cannot say her name. Like that's I've heard it a million times and I just can't pick it up.
yeah.
It's
We don't have to try anymore. It's okay.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's gonna be cool meeting some of the guys in person. Meeting people, gigantic people.
Yeah.
like
So you're doing it all. You're going to the meet and greet and everything.
yeah,
Oh, awesome, man. You'll have to try to get some footage or something.
yeah, right. I
Put
try
it up on the.
try to get Poirier on video saying he's gonna maul Habib.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be great. The I don't know if you've seen it. There's this guy that's getting some popularity in the MMA media world, the Schmo. Have you heard of this guy?
I have not.
He's terrible. He's the worst. Maybe he's good. I don't know. I don't pay a lot of attention, but we need. He basically made his rise overnight, asking good questions. So we need you to get in there, get all the information that the fans want, and then we'll pop off here.
Yeah, I'll stooge all the information off. Who does he work for though?
The Schmo? I
Yeah.
think he's self-run on YouTube, but I'm not sure.
Oh,
He had a
self-run.
media credential, but
Cool. Well,
yeah.
before we talk about UFC in Fort Lauderdale, you want to talk about UFC St. Petersburg for a minute?
Yeah, I think chronologically that makes sense.
Definitely
It was a good
does.
card. I saw it.
Yeah. What did you think about the main event, and what do you think about Overeem as you worded it off air, spamming the knees?
Yeah. It's for somebody who plays some video games from time to time, it was pretty obvious what his strategy was. He just let his, little brother handle the controls and he's mashing the B button trying to throw those knees and it worked. He knocked him out. You described it as a mild knockout because it was just business as usual for Alistair. He clinched up through knees. I think the crowd was behind Olynyk and he shut them up pretty good. So it was kind of low energy, but I think a lot of people at home liked the knockout. It got a lot of attention on the media circuits and stuff. The GIF got played a lot. So, I mean, it's always good to see Alistair Overeem going out there and getting a knockout. I was happy for the guy.
Yeah, it's always good to see it. I mean, I was kind of sour on this because it is, it's just I don't know how to word it. It's just a fight that I was not too intrigued for. But I mean, what do you think is next for Overeem? Do you foresee him getting some top competition, or do you think he's just gonna get another middle of the pack fight like this?
I'm not sure. I think that he's in position to make another title run. We've talked about it. Like Junior Dos Santos is in the middle of a little resurgence title run. The heavyweight division is one of the most unique in terms of the ladder to get to the title shot. And I think Alistair Overeem's learned that ladder very well. He knows that he only needs to put a few together to get that big opportunity. And, he's up there in years, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see him going forward again. It might take one or two fights, but I think they'll give him somebody notable, maybe not Curtis Blades because they train together, I believe still. I mean, Alistair's always bouncing around, but I think they'll find him a nice up-and-comer who's also vying for a title, and we'll get a good fight.
He did say that he wants to fight Volkov, though. And was it true that he was supposed to fight Volkov on this card, and something happened where Volkov couldn't make it? Like he was injured.
I had heard that. I don't know if they were originally booked. That would make a lot of sense. I know Volkov was supposed to be on this card, so probably that's what the situation was. What the rumor was is that Volkov had been busted by USADA. Right now, we're kind of living in this strange, actually, I think it's a dumb policy situation where if somebody does get busted by USADA and suspended, they don't tell us until they actually get their day in court. Which I get the idea because it's bad publicity to be like, oh, this guy tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, and then they appeal it and say it was an accident. But at the same time, it's leaving us fans in the dark. And and I'd love Volkov. I hope he's fighting again soon, but it sounds like he's gonna have to deal with the old USADA panel.
What would you think about the prospect of a possible Overeem Kane fight?
That's pretty intriguing. I mean, they never fought. They're two of the most prolific heavyweights ever.
It is weird that they've never fought too, is considering how long they've been around.
Yeah. I mean, Overeem was doing his thing in Strikeforce and various other promotions for a while, kind of avoiding the UFC. I think when Kane was making his rise, but still, that's a really good fight. I hadn't really ever considered it. I think that old Kane would have smashed Overeem, right? The stylistic matchup, I think, kind of Kane mitigates everything Overeem's trying to do, trying to be patient and land big shots. But nowadays, who knows what we're going to see from Cain Velasquez? So yeah, I'd be down for that one. Sign me up.
Hell yeah, that would be an intriguing matchup. What do you think about Alexei Oleinik? Do you think there's anything left for him at the top of the heavyweight division? I mean, we know guys well past their prime can still make runs, as we've seen with Junior Dos Santos, just to name one guy. But I mean, what do you think is next for him?
Yeah, he's got a great skill set for the heavyweight division, and really any division, but especially at heavyweight. Great chin, good power, and probably the best, ground game in the division. So, no, he can't take people down at will and impose his will. I don't think he's going to be a dominant fighter, but I think he's going to hang around at the very least. He could fall off maybe if he's not able to keep motivated now that he's kind of lost his newfound shine in the UFC, because he really has. He's been around forever, but this is the most popular, the most interest he's ever had. And, anybody eating those knees from Overeem's going to go down, but it was a tough one to see. He really wasn't able to get a lot of effective offense off. Overeem was kind of able to turtle up and mitigate any kind of damage that he was doing. So there's a lot of good fights for him. Hopefully he could put it together and make a run. I just don't think he's really got that top-end talent.
All right, let's talk about Islam Makhachev. He looked very impressive again against Aman. How do you say his last name? I don't think you can pronounce it either.
So you can.
We'll
say that's correct and move forward if we don't have to dwell on it.
No.
Yeah, Makhachev, he looked damn good, but I was equally impressed with Arman Tsuyukin because Islam Makhachev coming into that fight was the gigantic prospect. This was kind of a showcase fight for him, and he's the Dagestani wrestler. Everybody talks about the ground game these guys come into the sport with, but really Arman was the one who brought the grappling game to the fight, and he looked very impressive. He's a young guy. I think he's like 22 years old. So I think it was one of my favorite fights I had seen in a while that wasn't like a bloody just bleed war. It was back and forth wrestling, a lot of grappling, and ultimately I agreed with the decision, but I think Arman Tsuyukin was probably the bigger winner because he got a lot of attention for that performance.
Yeah, he got a ton of notoriety being in the co-main on a UFC ESPN Plus card. And Makhachev is the highlight here. He's on a roll. He's won 5 fights in a row, and he's been begging for a top 15 opponent. Do you think it's finally time that he's gonna get that? I mean, they've been kind of like just giving him these little prospect fights. But I mean, do you think we'll see some different competition for him moving forward?
Yeah, it's always a tough thing with these guys from non-English speaking countries. I mean, I'm not sure how good his English is, but the UFC really does look at factors like that when they decide to make that next big push for fighters. Obviously, if he keeps winning in dominant fashion, he'll get there. But
he's not like fluent. He doesn't have the common accent, but he does. He is able to articulate his words, but he still has the heavy accent, and it can be kind of tough to understand him. But then again, in the United States, even people that speak fluent English, like in England or in Ireland, people are like, oh, I can't understand what you're saying, But
Deep South, even, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
As long as you can sit him down, put a microphone in front of him, that's a huge deal. I mean, that's the first big step, I think, for the UFC to know that they can have some kind of discourse with the fan base, that they can throw on a promotion or something. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with them. I think that at lightweight, it's a long ladder to climb, and you kind of need that special opportunity, a fight with somebody that people know very well that's also highly ranked. And he may get that, maybe not, tomorrow. He might be on another European card next, but pretty soon he'll be, headlining the European cards. And then all of a sudden he'll be on the pay-per-views, and then he'll be fighting title. So he's got a little bit of ways to go. If he was in a thinner division, maybe he'd be there, but lightweight, it's as stacked as they come.
Plus, as long as Habib is on top, I don't know if he'll ever get close to the title with them being friends. So, but you never know what the outcome could be. We've seen friendships obviously blow up many a times, and people leave camps and whatever the drama may be.
It's
But
that gold. It's that championship gold, man. It taints the heart. It just ruins people, ruins friendships. It's truly evil, and I
yeah,
love it.
it's the money and the gold, like you said. But Islam Makhachev still a bit away. Hopefully, he'll get some steeper competition, and he'll be able to show what he can do against a really good fighter. But let's talk a little bit about Habib while we're on this. So, did you see his comments after the fight card about Dustin Poirier?
I actually hadn't, and you knew that because we talked about it beforehand. Uh, and I don't know why this didn't reach me because it's pretty hype. Poirier, Khabib, the trash talking is beginning. Yeah, I don't know how big it is.
It's not trash talking really. It was just
Sure.
Habib was being very respectful. He said that Poirier is clearly the second best fighter in the division behind him, and he respects his striking game, but he doesn't respect his ground game, and he's gonna have to maul him like he does everybody else. That was the gist of his interview with ESPN, and that sent the MMA world into a frenzy. Like, oh my God, Habib is gonna fight Poirier tomorrow. It was like people were freaking out, and we're still probably looking at fall. The fall in Abu Dhabi is the rumor, and both guys have been talking about it pretty openly. They've been saying Abu Dhabi, they've been saying September, and that's kind of what it's looking like right now.
I don't believe it. I'm saying it right now. It's an awesome fight. It's maybe the best fight possible in terms of, competitors in mixed martial arts for the sport. Best two, like most talented lightweights, maybe it's possible. Poirier looked very good, but I mean, Poirier is no Conor McGregor. Poirier is not even, Tony Ferguson in terms of value in a title fight against Khabib. It's possible, but color me skeptical, man. The UFC has shown their colors too many times. This is maybe the right fight to make right now, especially with Poirier wearing that interim belt. It's a unification fight. Always makes a ton of sense, but it doesn't always make dollars and cents, and that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, nevertheless, a Habib fight will still be a big draw for the company. I think Habib is a big enough star at this point where it doesn't really matter who he fights. I mean, yeah, it matters to an extent, but you can sell just about any fight for him. And I mean, it is what the tradition is supposed to be. Poirier is supposed to fight Habib, and it looks like it's going to happen. We don't know when. But are you skeptical on the fact that it's going to be, you don't think it's going to be Poirier and Habib, or you just don't think that those two are going to fight in September?
I don't think it'll be those two. I think it'll be either Tony Ferguson or Conor McGregor fighting Khabib. I think he's going to get jumped. I think that when you, like we were talking about just a minute ago with Islam Makhachev, when you sit him down in front of a microphone, what does he give people? If there's going to be this super fight, this crazy fight that they're going to invest a lot of promotion in, which they can do with those two other fights, the Tony fight or the Conor fight, you can't really do it with this fight because Dustin's just going to bore people. You could put his highlights on, but people also are going to talk about how Conor McGregor knocked out Poirier back in the day. And it's kind of a silly thing because Poirier, is a very different fighter now, but I just don't believe it. I'm reading the tea leaves right now and I don't see it.
Yeah, I guess Ariel Helwani doesn't see it either. When he had Poirier on his Ariel Helwani's MMA show on ESPN, he was talking to Poirier like it's not going to be Poirier fighting for the belt, and Poirier, was his usual bland self and didn't really do a whole lot to assure himself that position. He just pretty much said, "Well, I'm the interim champion, and that's tradition." And obviously
Yeah.
the UFC doesn't care about tradition; they care about dollar signs, like you said. So I think he's got to do a better job of promoting. He's on a big platform on ESPN, and he just wasn't doing it right
Yeah.
with the mic in his hand. I think he's got to be better than that.
Yeah, and one thing to consider is that he's not in a normal division. He's in the division with probably the two biggest stars in the sport, and then Tony Ferguson, who's also, one of the biggest guys, in the top, let's say 15 of the promotional value fighters. Dustin Poirier is gonna get a big fight. He's probably gonna whatever. So we named 4 names. he's probably going to match up with whichever one we didn't mention, right? If Khabib fights Conor, Poirier's probably going to fight Tony Ferguson, and mix it around however you want to. So he'll get another opportunity to really make a name for himself. And hey, if he goes out there, he doesn't say a damn thing, and he knocks out Conor McGregor, he knocks out Tony Ferguson, he'll get his title shot. And then if he knocks out Khabib, he'll be popular. He won't be as popular as Conor McGregor, but not everyone wants that. Not everyone wants to put themselves out there like that, or very few people actually even have the ability to, the wit, the desire, the personality. So he's a good guy. He's a great guy. He talks about his charity, and he's kind of that typical athlete, where maybe not the smartest guy in the world, but he says the canned answers that are appropriate for the situation. And it could get boring as a fan, especially in the fight game where, they're supposed to be hitting each other in the face. You don't want to hear about he's a good guy, he's a quality opponent, I look forward to fighting. No, you want to hear the trash talk. So he can get it done, but you're exactly right. If he promotes himself, it's only going to do good things for him.
So you foresee Conor or Ferguson jumping, but I mean there is a prospect too. Like, can Tony Ferguson even make it to the fight? Like, we've seen him try to fight Habib, God knows how many times at this point. And then Conor, just getting him to show up is a very rigorous process in its own right for Dana White. I'm sure he has many nightmares of trying to negotiate with Conor McGregor. So it's still there's always the standpoint of like, okay, well, we could do some pretty decent numbers, still probably do 1 million or close to 1 million buys by putting Habib and Poirier out there. We don't have to pay him as much, and we don't have to go through as much headache. So there is that side of the coin too.
Yeah, and they can always leverage the fighters against each other, and when that starts happening, you don't know what'll happen. What I mean by leverage is like, if Conor McGregor says, I'll fight for the title, but I want $50 million and X% of the pay-per-view buys, and they're like, well, that's cool, but we're going to offer, Dustin Poirier a fraction of that, and he's going to sign, so here's your real offer. And then, then maybe Conor McGregor is a little more willing to fight for a lower amount. Now all of a sudden we got Conor and Khabib. That kind of thing can really mess up the title fight. And I think you're right that we probably need somebody on standby between Khabib, Tony, the how often they fall out of fights. Somebody's going to have to be waiting in the wings to replace somebody. So it's a wild world right now at the top of the division, and it's only going to get better from here.
And now with ESPN in the UFC's back pocket, they have a really strong playing card too against other fighters that are quote unquote bigger than the promotion, because they're getting flat rate money now for every pay-per-view. So they really have no incentive to bring Conor McGregor in for whatever cost that may be. They could just say, okay, well, we're gonna get our money from ESPN and keep it moving. But do you think Conor is gonna fight Tony Ferguson? Do you think that might be a possibility? Because we're talking, assuming Poirier and Habib is the way they go. I know you don't agree with that, but if that is the way to go, do you think you have Conor and Tony Ferguson mix it up?
Be a good fight. I'm still worried about Tony Ferguson. I hope that things are better for him. I hope he's made a full recovery and things are going good. I know the wife took back the restraining order she had on him. He had mental health issues. I think it's been covered pretty widely. But the idea that he spoke to a therapist and everything's better now, that doesn't really seem to resonate with me. So I'm worried about his continued efforts in the sports. But okay, so let's say that the Poirier Khabib fight is booked, like you said, and they're looking for a fight for Tony Ferguson. Conor makes the most sense, right? Maybe Tony doesn't make the most sense for Conor, and that's why I'm a little bit skeptical, because then you have like the Cowboy Cerrone Ally Quinta situation going on. So I think that's the fight to make. I think it's the most likely, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that one either. I think with Conor McGregor, you have a really unique situation where his matchups are different than anyone else's, because they either want him to have the Khabib fight, the grand poobah where it's the big show, or somebody he can beat because they know he's their cash cow. So Tony Ferguson's not really somebody that you look at like, oh yeah, Conor McGregor will just run through him. Be a very competitive fight in my opinion, but I think that they would lean towards a safer option for Conor potentially.
Yeah, it seems like Cowboy really would be the way to go, right? Somebody that's a little bit older that maybe Conor can catch with a big punch and end the fight quickly and be Conor McGregor again. Have everybody going crazy and back on the Conor McGregor hype chain. So I guess Cowboy would be the most favorable matchup, but we know how those negotiations went. Cowboy's not a guy to fuck around with negotiations and
No,
really
he's just gonna sign a fight and go.
Yeah, he just wants to fight. He's like, just give me my fight. I don't care who it is. Tell me the date. Give me the contract. Whatever. We'll make it happen. Yeah. What other news was there, man? Anything that you had?
Well, before we get too far off the card from last week, and there's just a couple names I thought that really stood out that we'll have to talk about next time they come around in the UFC. You said, did you see the whole main card?
I did. Yeah, I saw the whole main.
So you saw the big old Russian tank, Sergey Pavlovich,
Yes,
the heavyweight, the knockout. Man, he looked impressive.
he did. He
I think
destroyed Marcelo Golm.
he's like 6'5", 260 pounds, about 26 years old. So just a baby face on a Russian experiment type body. It's exciting. I want to see him go again. His debut, he lost to Alistair Overeem. Why are they giving him Alistair Overeem? Stand that, but yeah, he looks super impressive, man. I can't wait to see him go again.
That must have been like a sub. Like he must have been like a last second replacement. You think, or for the
I
Overeem
can't
fight?
remember how it played out. I think that part of it was that they were hoping he would win, that he'd become a megastar overnight by knocking out Alistair.
Right.
That was my take on it, but I don't have any information, so
It's very
I don't
hard to
know. But
find any information on Sergey. I mean, all I know is that he is 6'3", 238 pounds, but it's hard to find anything outside of that.
well, I'm sure the USSR began the experiment a long time ago and hid all the data, kept it under closed files.
Oh my god. You're gonna get us in trouble.
No.
We're gonna get thrown off the air talking about conspiracy theories.
Yeah, we don't got the tinfoil hats. No good.
Man, no, I'm not even gonna say what I was gonna say. That'll throw us way far down the weeds. So yeah, what do you think about Roxanne and Antonia Shevchenko? What do you think about that fight?
My brain doesn't know how to process that fight, man. I know you remember me talking trash about Roxanne going to the fight, how she's just such an inferior athlete. Really doesn't even belong in mixed martial arts at the highest stage. And she goes out there and she takes out one of the most interesting prospects in the women's flyweight division. You could hear Shevchenko's sister, Valentina, screaming the whole fight, trying to fire it up. Roxanne just did what she does. Kind of herky-jerky, awkward movements, got in on the legs, got the takedowns when she needed, and came away with a split decision. And for anybody who followed my advice saying that Antonio Shevchenko is a lock as a bet, I apologize. I never actually said that, though, so don't blame me.
Man, you were wrong about a bet. Oh wow, that's color me shocked. That's never happened, not even once. But I mean, Antonia Shevchenko, I mean, she was really, really hyped. You know, she was like one of the more hyped female fighters of recent memory. You know, and do you think the hype train is all but done for her? Or do you think that she'll get a fight again that she can win and all will be right in the world?
I would say the hype train is definitely a little bit derailed. Man, it's a tough loss to come back from. Obviously, stylistically, that's the issue she ran into. Facing a grappler who just was committed to the grappling game, and really where it was pretty clear Shevchenko was weak. I think that she's always going to have some attention because of her sister. She's fairly attractive, which is definitely a huge deal in general in MMA, but especially in the women's divisions. And she does have some pretty interesting striking. I mean, her knees. She packs a decent punch for a flyweight, so she'll stick around, I think, for a few fights. But yeah, I don't see her ever vying for a title. Not with a performance like that. No.
Yeah, it was not a good look for her. And then, what other fight were you looking at?
Well, we had that opener on the main card. There were some good fights on the prelims. I thought it was a fun card, but I think the fight that really was the highest two-level fighters, Jotko and Alan Amadovsky. We were kind of talking about Amadovsky coming into it, just interesting 8-0 prospect with great punching power. And he lost at 30-25, 30-26, and 30-26 for the scorecards. Jotko schooled him, showed him that there's different levels of fighters, especially when you can impose your wrestling game on somebody and just completely shut him down. So great performance for Jacko. He's always been a guy that people are excited for, and a quality win there. So
Man,
just worth mentioning.
10-8 rounds, huh?
And it, 2-10-8s. Yeah, that's what it would be. Yeah. So
Wow.
very dominant performance for Jacko.
That's well, there goes our hype train. We decided to talk about a prospect, and what do you know? He gets hit with 2-10-8s. So
Well, Jotko is a very established name, and he did it in a way that yes, it was a dominant performance, but he never really gave Allen a chance to show what he can do on in the stand-up game, and that's really where he's probably going to excel. So we'll see him again, I'm sure. He'll be back.
Yes, sir. But so any other fights you wanted to highlight in this card? Because I did want to talk about Bellator after we.
Nah, that seems good to me. I mean, like we said, the prelims were a lot of fun. It was a fun card in St. Petersburg. Always cool to see him, branching out. Russia is a huge potential market. Maybe not the most buying power, but definitely a lot of people there very interested in the sport. A lot of great athletes. So it was a good show. I was happy for how it all played out.
They should capitalize on that market, considering that their second biggest star right now is Russian. So it would make the most sense. Uh, but yeah, so we got Bellator coming up, Bellator 220, headlined by Rory Macdonald and Jon Fitch. This is the opening round of a Grand Prix in the welterweight division, and they have the welterweight world title on the line. Does that seem silly to you, or are you favorable of that idea of having the world title on the line in the opening fight of a tournament in the quarterfinals?
I like that the champion's in the tournament. That it's not usually when we get these Grand Prix, it's because there's a vacancy as a champion. But Rory Macdonald's that crazy kind of dude who's like, you know what? I like being champion, but why don't we just do a Grand Prix? Why don't we just do a crazy tournament? Some of the best welterweights outside of the UFC, and most of these welterweights are UFC caliber, and then some. Some of them. I mean, Rory Macdonald, clean win over Tyron Woodley before he left. So yeah, I love it. I think the 5-round fights are nice. I think they brought in the appropriate talent level to make it work. A lot of big names. I mean, Jon Fitch was ranked number 2 in the welterweight division for I think 4 years or so straight. So, he's a legend of the sport. Rory Macdonald, everyone knows about him. It's a great fight, and I think that some of the other fights we got earlier in the tournament that were 5-rounders really benefited. And it's a cool concept that we're going to see the belt slide along as this tournament progresses.
Yeah, Rory Macdonald had one of the most legendary fights in recent memory. Everybody remembers that one with Robbie Lawler. This is definitely one of the better Bellator cards in recent memory. Bellator is really a mixed bag. Sometimes it's a really good card, and then other times it's like, why am I watching this? It's like, would you agree that it's either really good or really bad for Bellator?
They definitely load cards. They take, one card might have one fighter that, was in the UFC and he's the headliner and he's their champion or something. And then every other fight is local people or, some prospect that is kind of getting there but doesn't really have a name yet. They definitely have those smaller cards, and then they'll have their big cards. They've even done pay-per-views with how much they've stacked certain fights. It's an interesting promotional strategy. It definitely works because you almost need to stack a card to compete with the attention that the UFC gets for every single card. And they're going to be going head-to-head with a UFC card this weekend. So, yeah, I think it's pretty good. I don't know if it's the most stacked Bellator card I've ever seen, but there's, 5 really good quality fights?
Yeah, there's a few good fights on there. I mean, it's definitely one of the better cards that we have seen. I mean, Phil Davis is taking on Liam McGurry. Got Benson Henderson is on the card as well. So there's some good quality names on there. But
Oh, absolutely.
We got
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm probably gonna do the old 2-screen. Got UFC over here, Bellator over here, and a big old box of popcorn. I'm excited.
yeah, it's gonna be a cool night of fights. I'll have to catch this one. And definitely have to catch this one on demand or find some highlights on Twitter. I could be that guy that's like sitting there watching the fight on my phone while I'm at the UFC fight, but
Yeah. One of the lesser fights are going on. The ones. Oh, you know what you gotta do? You gotta do it during the co-main of the. We'll get into the UFC co-main event eventually.
Can't wait.
But yeah, before we move on from it, I mean, I don't know if you want to break down each fight, but I just gotta say, Jon Fitch was my favorite fighter back in the day. So to see him still at it in the sport, I know he got busted for steroids. Wasn't always a fan favorite. He was one of those grapplers we talked about that fans didn't always buy into, but he's still going at it. You gotta give it up to the guy. He's endured, I think, in the sport a lot longer than people expected after he fell out of the UFC. So
he's a bad man.
If he could pull this off, one, it's a bad sign for Rory. A lot of people are concerned about Rory Macdonald's body giving out on him at this point. His last fight was against one of the best middleweights in the world, so I don't really read too much into that, but his nose is an issue. It keeps getting broken, and yeah, it's just we'll see what happens here. Hopefully, he can kind of put things together, and hopefully his face stays intact this time. It's definitely, if you're gonna fight somebody and try not to break your nose, Jon Fitch is a good pick because he does not necessarily have the most violent approach to the sport.
And he's definitely seen better days as well. He's pushing 41. Then you alluded to Rory Macdonald taking the loss to Gegard Mousasi, and there's no shame in losing to Gegard Mousasi. He's a game competitor. He's an animal. Do you want to break down the every fight on the card
Well, probably not every fight,
or
but
the main card?
yeah, I don't know anything about this women's fight, Lemmy Leigh McFarlane. Do you know anything about that?
I
It's
know
the
that
co-main.
I know that she's one of the better women's flyweights in the world. They're saying that if she was, I've heard people say that if she was in the UFC, she'd be a contender, but she's still nowhere near Valentina. So I guess it's better for her to stay in Bellator where she can kind of rule on a smaller pond until she's developed her skills. But I mean, she's a good wrestler from what I've heard. She's 9-0. She's relatively new in MMA. But aside from that, I don't know much about her opponent.
Uh, so her last win was over Valerie Letourneau. I do remember that getting promoted in Bellator now, and now I'm starting to remember the Bellator push for her. So I
Yeah,
can kind of
she
understand.
main evented a card in Bellator. They had a card in Hawaii in her home state, and I believe she main evented if I'm not mistaken.
Was that this last one? Maybe.
Yeah,
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. UFC Bellator 213, McFarlane versus Letourneau. Yeah, and she won that fight via triangle choke. She's undefeated. I think that it's a cool approach to put this like legitimate prospect in the co-main on a card that they are stacking because it's going to force eyeballs on her. Like a lot of people tend to tune out or tune into Bellator after the fights we talked about earlier, the local fighters, the unknown people. They skip those and then they watch the former UFC guys, the big prospects, and they're kind of just throwing her right on us. Can't miss it if you're watching Bellator, and good chance to make a big name for herself. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one.
let me stop you there because you said that a lot of people are going to tune into this fight. Now, this is only available on the Zone. So, do you think that enough people care about Bellator to be willing to shed $20 a month for the Zone? I mean, obviously you could do $20 a month if you want to do it that way, or you could shell out $100 for the year. But I mean, aside from like Canelo boxing and like Canelo Alvarez fighting, and there's some Major League Baseball stuff on there. I'm not sure if there's really enough people that are willing to throw down that kind of money for the Zone. What do you think?
No, I think you make a good point. I've heard people very excited about the products that DAZN's offering. They're talking about what a great deal it is. Those people almost unanimously boxing fans. They have a great boxing package. So yes, the Bellator fights. There's a lot of good Bellator fights, but I think the attention that they're going to get is going to be a lot of. Maybe I should have said tuning into the fight so much as viewing the results of the fight. And since it is getting promoted as a co-main, it is going to get like talked about by the media a little bit more than if it was buried lower on the card. The media tends to gravitate towards the top of the card, and she's definitely somebody who's going to create stories. So yeah, she'll get the push. But as far as the Zone goes, to get back to that, it's an interesting approach. I think a lot of people are curious about what the UFC would look like if they had their own package similar to what the Zone does. It's going to be a good experiment. I want to see how it does, especially with Bellator and just overall.
They've already committed boatloads of money to Canelo Alvarez and among other guys, Triple G, among other fighters. I believe they have Anthony Joshua too, and I
Yeah.
do want to talk about boxing as well in just a moment after we finish talking about this card. But yeah, so the Zone, I mean, it's they're gonna be around for a while, I think, if they're committing that kind of money. But I'm just curious if Bellator is really gonna benefit from it. They were ahead of the curve on the streaming. They went full streaming before the UFC decided to move over to the ESPN Plus. They've been doing this for a little while, and I mean, it intrigues me. I just don't know if like it's worth shelling out that kind of money right now because boxing is not as. I mean, boxing is hotter than it's been in a long, long time, but it's still not as big. It's still not as big as it has been before. So I don't know. I just think Bellator. I mean, yeah, the media, like you said, the media is gonna cover it. All the MMA websites are gonna talk about Rory Macdonald for sure and Alima, but outside of that, I'm not sure if like the casual fan will be drawn to really spend the kind of money on the Zone.
In the short term, I think that probably you could say that it's It's not a very effective way to bring in fans. Like especially if you're not a fan of Bellator, but you're kind of intrigued by, let's say, this main event, Jon Fitch, Rory Macdonald. Like, oh yeah, maybe I'd kind of want to see that. You're not going to shell out $20 to do it. You would have seen it for free on TV, and then you may become a fan of Bellator. So that's the kind of growth and stuff that Bellator really wants. I think pretty obviously they want to grow. They want to compete with the UFC at some level. They want to be more. Everyone wants to make more money. I don't know if they're going to be, this is an effective way to do it or not. Maybe. I think we're going to have to see long term how the general like viewing media goes. If everything becomes streaming and they got, the best streaming platform because they've been doing it longer and people know about it, it could be pretty interesting. And we'll see what kind of products they add to the package too as it goes on, because it's an interesting mix right now with the big boxing investment and, like you said, a little bit of baseball, some MMA. It's interesting for sure, but I'm not a subscriber at this moment.
And the question really is like there's the money fight out there is some form of the combination of the three heavyweight boxing fighters, Dante Wilder, Tyson Fury, and Anthony Joshua. But with one of those guys being committed to the Zone, and then another guy on Showtime, another guy on HBO, it's like, how the hell is it going to happen? The Zone can't get into that because their whole gimmick and their presentation is no more pay-per-view. So they put themselves in a tough spot there. But it's intriguing. The growth and the business side of this equation really fascinates me. But
Yeah.
yeah, let's keep it moving though. Let's talk about some more fights. You want to talk about Phil Davis versus Liam McGeary?
It's an interesting fight. I think it's one of the better fights they could have booked at light heavyweight. Ryan Bader, I think, is the current light heavyweight champion, but he just won the heavyweight Grand Prix. So I'm not sure what their plan is there, but this is, if there is a potential, title fight coming out of Bellator soon at light heavyweight, I would imagine the winner of this is in really good shape to be the guy to challenge either Ryan Bader or somebody else for the light heavyweight title.
Did you see the rumor that Ryan Bader is going to fight Czech Congo?
Really? That's kind of cool. Czech Congo's been doing pretty well in Bellator. As far as I'm aware, I think he's won like 3 straight or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd like to see Ryan Bader make a run at it at heavyweight. He's a huge dude. I don't know how much weight he cuts, but he looked very good in the heavyweight tournament. Obviously, won it and everything. It wasn't the most talent-stacked Grand Prix. It's not quite as talent-loaded as the welterweight tournament. I mean, Chael Sonnen aside, of course, he had the greatest fighter of all time in that tournament. But no, Ryan Bader, he's really coming into his own. I think the UFC wasn't too sad letting him go to Bellator, but he's in the right size because he was never going to get past John Jones, I don't think. I don't think he's going to beat somebody like Daniel Cormier. So I think this is the great place for him where he can kind of become his own little star in Bellator. And then, who knows what kind of fights we'll get in the future. So
let me just shed some light on that.
Big ups to him.
Let me just shed some light on what I just said. So Scott Coker was on ESPN, and he confirmed that it's going to be Ryan Bader fighting Czech Congo, and then the winner of that fight is going to fight Josh Barnett in Josh Barnett's Bellator debut. So a little bit of news there. Just want to throw that out there.
Some Bellator heavyweight news.
Yep.
Yeah, we don't have to linger too much on the Bellator thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the takeaway from that fight, Liam McGeary drew a lot of interest. He had a very aesthetically pleasing style, some very fun submissions where he kind of attacked from angles you don't usually see on the ground, and also, a solid British striking game and a good personality to boot. So a lot of people are excited to see him do well. He's had struggles, though. I don't think he's quite there talent-wise. I think Phil Davis is probably going to throw him around a little bit, but Phil Davis is another one that at one time was considered, a future champion type prospect and never really put it together, but now we're seeing him get a lot of knockouts, he's throwing with a lot more power than he ever did, a lot more confidence. So if he could go out there and put on a dominant performance, we might be looking at Phil Davis as somebody who could vie for that rematch with Ryan Bader. That I think it would be their third fight, but there's a good rivalry there, and I think Phil Davis is a pretty talented dude. So
he's got a real chance to shine. What you think about Benson Henderson and Adam Piccolotti?
Ben Henderson's been struggling. He had that thing where he was bouncing between lightweight, welterweight, a little undersized at welterweight. I think after he lost his title in the UFC, he kind of, maybe, I don't want to say lost interest in fighting, but maybe wasn't as aggressive as he used to be, maybe, or he just kind of relied on skills instead of being more of a fighter. It seems like he was willing to just kind of coast, which is not a good look. This fight here, though, I mean, every fight's another opportunity to impress. I think his skill set, I think, is a little outdated for the UFC. He was just kind of, or MMA. MMA is kind of evolved. You need a little bit more, a little more pop, a little more excitement. And he was just kind of a really strong guy who wrestled very well, but wasn't Khabib dominant. So I'm always going to watch him fight. I hope he pulls out that toothpick at some point. But, I don't even know. I don't even know if he's going to be talked about by people after the fight's over. Do you know what I mean? Like,
No,
he's kind of just old news at this point.
I get it. No, I get it. I completely understand. Yeah, this fight, Bellator 220 is going down April 27th. Saturday, April 27th, only on the DAZN app or DAZN.com. Yeah. So you want to get to UFC for Lauderdale now?
Well, you mentioned boxing, and I'm wondering.
Oh yes, that's right. Boxing. Dana White was quoted as, not really quoted. Well, yeah, he was quoted, but he's been teasing the Zuffa boxing more than ever recently. He's really going in talking about Anthony Joshua, how Anthony Joshua has kind of been misused in the boxing world, and he thinks that he can do better with him. He didn't say that directly, but you get the drift of him saying that, by his comments. And he was just talking about how Anthony Joshua, if presented properly in the United States, could be one of the biggest stars in sports and in pop culture in general. And he said that sometime after the summer, assumingly the fall or the winter of 2019, maybe early 2020, we're gonna see. He said, quote. He said, quote. We're gonna see. You're gonna see what I'm gonna do in boxing. So I don't know if it's just more Dana White teasing, which is it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just saying things and not following up on it. But I mean, what do you think of these comments? Do you think we might actually see something come to fruition finally of the whole Zuffa boxing experiment? And do you think it is a potential way out for him after his contract is up with the UFC, where he can? I'm sure he's going to be done after these 7 years. He's going to be mentally fried and just maybe would like to take a break and do boxing only.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it'd be Zuffa Boxing. Zuffa is the company that the Fertitta brothers and Dana White kind of they own the UFC, but there was always Zuffa owns the UFC, and then Zuffa sold the UFC to WME. So it's not a UFC boxing. I've heard people talk about it as UFC boxing. It wouldn't be that if it's Zuffa. It would be a different organization, and that makes me wonder if there'd be some kind of non-compete clause issues with Dana White. I kind of doubt it, because boxing and MMA aren't exact. They're not the same sport. They're different. So I don't know legally, if there's any hangups there. Let's say it's all free and clear, though. Let's say Dana White's contract runs up. What would you say, 2020 or something like that?
He's got 7 years. He just signed. He just re-upped 7 years. So.
Okay, so it's a long ways away.
But he said by the end of the summer we're gonna see some stuff from Zuffa Boxing. So
is he gonna be involved? Do you think?
He was seen wearing a Zuffa Boxing shirt. He's been wearing them some occasionally. So I guess if there was a breach of contract, that would have been it, right? Wearing the T-shirt.
Yeah, Dana White doesn't really have any. DGAF.
Yeah,
he always is doing this kind of stuff, and he's so valuable to the WME and UFC that I don't think they're just gonna fire him for throwing this stuff out there. My concerns are, so I think there's two ways you got to look at the pros and cons of the potential Zuffa boxing. One, Dana White is one of the most prolific promoters ever. I mean, we're talking about going into the old days of boxing, the Don King and stuff. There's a lot of big names that were promoters, not fighters, but promoters. And Dana White's he's in there with them. And I think that he came up in a boxing promotion kind of background. That's kind of what he brought to MMA. And we've seen time and time again, boxers are some of the best promoters in the world. It's a huge part of the sport, and it's embraced in a different way than MMA. And it really it's built on more of a tradition of promotion, whereas the UFC was kind of this new unique thing that had a lot of fresh approach to the promotion that were probably more similar to WWE than boxing. Dana White making his transition to boxing, though, I think immediately you get that attention, that pop, that publicity, and that's great. But the concern is the Ali Act that controls boxing, the stipulations and rules about what promoters can do and how fighters have to be involved in it. it does, in my opinion, really hurt the sport, and it really makes it tough for promoters to build a brand long term. And that's what Dana White made his name off of. He had so much control in the MMA world through the UFC, especially as time went on. That I just feel like he played the game on medium difficulty and he crushed it, and now he's trying to turn it up to very hard. And I don't know if he's going to be able to do it. I think he might do well, but I don't think he's going to be, the kind of the face that brings his or its promotion to the forefront of the sport. I think he's just going to be another fish in the pond.
Yeah, it's interesting because he'll have an outlet really to take all the things that he's learned in the UFC, all the mistakes he's made, all the good things he's done, and kind of start something fresh and look at it from a different perspective and utilize that to make like something great potentially. But he was really talking about Anthony Joshua, so I don't know what's gonna happen there. If he's gonna have Anthony Joshua on board, I'm not sure how that's gonna work out. But I guess we'll see something. I don't know, but like you said, can he do this legally? Their obligations. Like, is he even gonna be involved? Is he just talking? I don't know. It's too early to speculate, and this thing has been speculated for a long time. But him kind of giving a time frame is really what got people talking again. But I mean, outside of that, I think we pretty much like said everything we can say at this point. Don't you think?
Yeah, maybe we'll get some crumbs along the way. I think it is exciting. It's cool. It's an interesting thing, but I almost look at it as like, Conor McGregor going over to boxing. It's kind of just you're still an MMA guy. You're using your MMA pop to bring a little something, but you're not in that world necessarily. And maybe over time he could do that, but I think that the boxers have their own kind of culture, and maybe they wouldn't accept him, and I don't know how much that would even hurt him. At this point, he's so big, and there's the X factor of the ex MMA fighters going over to Zuffa boxing, right? We've already seen how somebody like Conor McGregor could break all the pay-per-view records in a boxing match. We've seen interest for Artem Lobov in boxing. There are already known names in the fight game. There's fans of them that are going to want to see what they do when you put the big gloves on. So there's a lot of potential there. It's exciting. It's cool, but I think you're right. We do got to wait to get a little more information before we really start getting too excited.
Yeah, it could be one of those things. We saw Vince McMahon dabble into pro football a while back, and he's doing it again next year. The XFL is coming back, the infamous XFL. I think he's learned a thing or two, but it is kind of it's like, okay, you're a wrestling guy. Everybody knows you as a wrestling guy. They know what you can do. People will watch it just because they love your company, but the casual fan is gonna look at it and say, this is an MMA guy. Why is he doing boxing? It may be tough to get casuals at first, so there's going to be some work there to do for sure. Yeah, so you ready to get to UFC for Lauderdale?
I am. Are you?
I am.
I bet you're excited. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. There's some fights on this card. I can't wait to see some of these fights live. I've never been to an MMA fight in person, so I'm very excited for my first one. And I mean, it's not the ideal card. I would have liked to go to a pay-per-view, of course, for my first card, but hey, this is better than nothing. But I want to start with Greg Hardy. I think that's the biggest talking point that comes out of this pay-per-view. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I hate it.
Me too.
but it is, right?
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm down. Start us off. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we saw Greg Hardy get disqualified in his debut in the UFC with the infamous illegal knee. Well, and he was the co-main, if my memory serves me right. I believe he was the co-main on that card. Um, I think it's a disgrace to have this guy as a co-main again. Like, having him a co-main at first, in the first place at all, period, was bad. But then him getting disqualified, and then they give him a fighter that nobody not a lot of people know who his opponent is, and they're clearly giving him a softball, hoping he can get a win, and he can be on the highlights. Right after the NFL game, not NFL, the NBA games, they can show Greg Hardy knocking somebody out on Sports Center. That's what the UFC is hoping for, because they got a hard on for publicity and the ex NFL fighter. But like we said before, he was not a big star in the NFL, but it's clearly just because it's just he's here just because we gotta have the NFL guy on ESPN. But I think it's a disgrace.
Yeah, I think. I almost used a terrible euphemism. I was almost gonna say I think we beat the controversy. Or no, I almost said we beat it like a dead horse, but we're not going to go that way. We talked about this a lot last time because it's crazy. It's this guy who, like, yes, he made a big name for himself in the NFL, but really the story that everybody thinks of, that they talk about, is the violent crime, the abuse that, he had his days in court and he wasn't convicted, and he's free to compete, and the UFC is free to sign him. And I think that, if he is a legitimate UFC caliber heavyweight, by all means sign him. But what we're seeing, it almost feels more like they're taking advantage of all the publicity he got for doing this thing. It's almost like, if Michael Vick had signed with the UFC after the dogfighting thing, like, yes, he was a great athlete. He was tremendous. And Michael Vick's maybe a worse.
That would have been a bigger deal, though, a much bigger deal.
Yes.
Michael Vick was
Yes.
huge in the sports world.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He was the face of the league for a couple of years. But I guess my point is, the promotion should be about the athlete, but it doesn't always. We have a lot of reasons that we promote people for things despite or outside of their athletic achievement. We had CM Punk on the main card of a pay-per-view. We have
He
every day
co-mained too, didn't he? He co-mained that pay-per-view with Overeem and Stipe.
Was he co-main with the second fight?
No, the first one with Mickey Gall. I believe he was the co-main on that card.
I think he led off the pay-per-view. I think he was the first fight on the pay-per-view. I could be wrong.
I'm gonna find
But
it. Go ahead.
Yeah, either way, prestigious slot when he obviously as a talent, as an athlete, nowhere near there. But we see people get pushed all the time. They're attractive, they're funny, they made a name for this, they did that. But this is just unsettling because the thing that made Greg Hardy the most well known. I mean, he was well known, but the most well known is the controversy that followed him. And he had his chance to kind of like, okay, yeah, we're giving him a little special treatment, but he's a freak. He's a freak of nature. He knocks everyone out. It's awesome. Watch. And then he tried and he couldn't. And then he got mad and he needed to do it in the head. And he was dead exhausted. He couldn't even stand up after he showed that he needs a ton of work on his game. We don't know if he'll ever be able to make the improvements to really compete with the best of the best. So, yeah, I mean, it's obvious what's happening. Like you said, he's the NFL guy on the sports network, ESPN. They're going to have, I don't know if they'll do coverage of day 3 of the NFL draft, but that'll be going on Saturday. So the NFL is all abuzz right now, and it's big in the news. And now we got this ex-NFL star. Well, I don't even know if I'd call him a star in the NFL, but a big name from the NFL. So yeah, I understand the push, but man, it don't feel right.
And it's outside of that too. Just when you look at the actual fights on this card, this Greg Hardy is the co-main over Cowboy Oliveira and Mike Perry and John Lineker and Corey Sandhagen. Just from a pure MMA standpoint, either one of those two fights could easily co-main. Could easily co-main this card. And it's like, why is this ex-NFL player in there? But I get what they're going for. They're hoping Greg Hardy gets that 2-minute highlight reel knockout, so they can replay it over and over again.
Yeah. And no matter what happens, it'll probably, at the end of the day, be the most talked about fight, too. I mean, maybe outside of the main event, maybe outside of the Mike Perry fight, but it's just, there's so much attention on it. And I think you also get this thing where there's like kind of a cap you hit. You could have, Jacare is a legend of the sport. Everyone in the MMA community knows him. They're excited to see him every time he fights, but that's all he's bringing in is excitement in the MMA community. Whereas once you can kind of branch outside of it a little bit, you're drawing on a huge population of people. The NFL fans are everywhere, and everyone is, at least casually aware of Greg Hardy that followed the NFL. So, yeah, you're just drawing on a much larger population of fans and bringing attention, hopefully, to the other fighters and bringing attention to the UFC. That's positive stuff. That's good stuff. But it's such a negative reason that it's as big as it is. It's tough.
And I doubt Greg Hardy's going to drive any ESPN Plus subscriptions. But I mean, is any fight on this card, quite frankly, going to draw ESPN Plus subscriptions? We should talk about that for a moment too. This fight was originally supposed to be on ESPN. It was supposed to be UFC on ESPN 3, but after all the mess with the main event, the hometown boy Joel Romero had to pull out of the fight, and then Paulo Costa was supposed to fight. That was supposed to be the original fight, Paulo Costa versus Joel Romero. That didn't happen, and then Jacare stepped in and for Costa, and that was supposed to happen, but then Yoel pulled out. So now we've got the Joker, Jack Hermansson, and Jacare Sosa. So that's obviously not a fight that the UFC wants to put on the main flagship ESPN channel. So they had to make a lateral movement. So I guess the next ESPN card is going to be Robbie Lawler and Tyron Woodley. Haven't really seen anything about it, but that's going to be the next ESPN card. But yeah, that's fascinating, huh? How like the main event can really dictate the UFC's movements.
Yeah, they salvaged the main event better than we've seen cards fall apart in much more devastating fashion, especially when you lose both of the guys who are scheduled to be in the main event. They did a decent job salvaging it, but you're right. It makes sense for the lateral move. It's kind of interesting that they were able to do it. I mean, we've seen it a few times with different like there's been pay-per-views that got moved to Fox and stuff like that a couple times here and there, but it seemed pretty casual this time. So it's cool that there's that flexibility. I don't think we'll ever see like a ESPN Plus card become an ESPN card, but it makes sense. They got a lot of content that they're going to be able to push on their, it's ESPN. They're going to put on some big name sports. So I don't mind it. I mean, I got ESPN Plus and I don't got cable, so I don't mind the move. But
yeah,
I still think it's a really good fight card.
It is. Overall, it's a good fight card. I mean, obviously, the lack of a big time main event is going to hurt it. Greg Hardy being in the co-main, I think, hurts it too, whether we like it or not. But what do you think about the matchup of Jack Hermansson taking this fight on short notice against Jacare, who's also taking this fight on short notice? What do you think about that matchup? Who do you like in this one?
Hermansson's going to be a lot more cage fresh. He fought very recently. Great win. That submission. I don't think he's going to submit Jacare by any means. I think the big X factor in this one is really just what kind of Jacare are we going to see? Because he's no spring chicken. He's getting up there in years. We've seen him kind of start to show signs of decline and then kind of come back and look like a great athlete all of a sudden again. And he's always going to have devastating power. He's got, of course, the potential to submit anybody. And he's got this kind of attitude where, like, you don't want to make this guy mad at you. And Jack Hermansson, going to be, I think, the taller guy, the rangier guy, and maybe even the better athlete overall. But I think that Jacare has a little bit more of that X factor, a little bit more of that top-end performance that he's shown us. So Hermansson's not going to – we don't really know a whole lot about how much he improved before his last fight, but because he finished that fight pretty quick. But I think he needs to be better than he was 2 years ago if he wants any chance in this fight, even with an aging Jacare. And I think he probably is better. So it's cool. It's exciting. It's the one guy on his way up, one guy on his way down. We'll see where they meet.
What do you think Hermansson's key to victory is? And could you see Hermansson really making a leapfrog if he does knock off Jacare and putting himself right into the forefront of the middleweight title picture?
I think he's got to chin check Jacare. I think he's got to hurt Jacare in a way that makes Jacare not able to stalk him and start throwing those power punches. Like I said, he is going to be the longer fighter. He does have decent power on the end of his punches. I mean, these guys are cut down to 185. So I think sometimes we forget how big the dudes at middleweight are because of, the light heavyweight and the heavyweight division above them. But these are giant human beings. They hit very hard. If he can connect clean on Jacare, especially with Jacare getting up there in years, having taken some big shots over the last couple years, he could definitely hurt him and then, get an exciting finish or at least parlay that damage into a nice decision win if he can keep it standing. Jacare's takedowns are nasty, though, so he's going to have to stay out of range of those. He's not going to be able to push forward like maybe he would want to keep Jacare's offense at bay. So it's a tough fight, but I think he's just got to be able to move his feet, stay active, stay away from those takedowns, and just try to catch Jacare from the outside.
Yeah, if this fight goes to the ground, I think it's one of those where it's like, okay, Jacare's got this. I think Hermansson wants to stay as far away from the ground as humanly possible. And Jacare is no slouch on the feet. I mean, we've seen him land some pretty heavy knockouts. He packs a punch, man. He's a big dude. I wonder what's in the water out there in Brazil. Yeah, I beat you
Steroids. I subtly implied it earlier when I said he was aging and then he came back looking like a better athlete. Yeah, fans of the show know my feelings on it. I think everyone's on something. Jacare's been known in the past, even before he kind of made his entrance into the MMA world. In the grappling world, he's considered one of the most obvious PED users. Never got busted, so yeah, we can't say a whole lot, but we'll say if you are reading between the lines, he's one of the most suspicious people out there. But hey, everyone's doing it, and he's doing it better than other people. He's like what they used to say with Barry Bonds. He's the one swinging the bat, right? He's the one throwing those punches. He's the one locking in those submissions, and he's one of the better ones out there to ever do it. So,
USADA's testing is very rigorous. We've heard about Holly Holm being tested 42 times or whatever it was, but how many times is Jacare being tested? Who knows?
yeah, well, sometimes I feel like those tests are kind of like, when the little kids have to put the star into the star slot, the circle in the circle slot of the box. It's just, you just got to do what you're supposed to do. They know how to beat the test. They know how to microdose. So, yeah, the USADA's great. We've seen athletes shrink. They aren't as obviously juiced up as they used to be. I love what they do for the sport. They they create a lot of issues, a lot of controversy because it isn't fair. It's impossible to regulate PED use fairly across the board. Some people are tested less or more than others, and some people are lucky and are unlucky. They accidentally get the tainted supplements, things like that. But I think overall it's been great for the sport.
Oh man,
how are you doing over there?
I love the steroid talk.
Yeah, but we'll see what Jacare looks like. When somebody asks me who do I pick in this fight, I just got to see how physically Jacare looks. I think that's really the biggest X factor here.
Oh, I forgot to ask you. Are you picking Greg Hardy in his fight?
I would have to look at the betting odds to see if it's even close. I think that I don't know anything about Dmitry Smolyakov that they have him fighting. I would guess that they gave him somebody
like off the street.
But there isn't even a Dmitry Smolyakov. They're just gonna be perusing the bums out there right before the fight starts, shooing them in. All right, you go. You look like a heavyweight.
Yeah, okay, this guy. Yep. Go ahead. Yep. I'll give you. It's like Are you familiar with a jobber in pro wrestling?
Yeah. That's what this is exactly.
Like a squash match. Just all right. Here, you want 50 grand to lose to Greg Hardy? There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's not going to get 50 grand. I'm guessing. But still, all the same, yes. It's going to be a great payday for somebody who probably wouldn't be seeing it otherwise, even though he knows he's supposed to lose. It's been done in boxing for a long time too. A lot of boxers have these inflated records because they're fighting jobbers, people who have records of like 13 and 39.
Oh, sorry, did I say that? Oh. I don't know.
50-0, man.
I don't know what happened. Now, speaking of payouts, what do you think Greg Hardy's going to get paid for this? Like 150 grand, 100 grand? Is he there yet, you think?
I think he did the last time he fought. They did disclose his payout. Can't remember what it was, but yeah, he's getting paid good dollars. Definitely, because they don't want him signing with Bellator. They didn't want him signing with ONE FC. You know what I mean? They had to make a offer. He was a commodity. People wanted to sign him, and the UFC did. So I'm guessing, as you look it up here, probably about that 150. Maybe he's even one of those guys that doesn't have a win bonus. Maybe he's just straight. Because that seems to be, it's kind of interesting. A lot of fighters are starting to come out and say that, we should get rid of this win-loss payout structure. It should be a flat payout for every single fight. I kind of agree with that, but Greg Hardy had a lot of negotiation power. We'll say that much.
What is the promotional guidelines compliance? What is that?
Is it like a state-by-state, whether you report payouts, whether you do this, whether you do that? I'm not sure the context. I haven't heard of that before.
Interesting. I'm trying to find a payout. I can't find an exact number. Let me see.
Usually, if they do share it, each state will have a different policy whether or not they need to share it. California is known to be one that really makes the UFC share a lot of information. Fighters have to share their weight on weigh-in or on fight day, things like that. So I don't know where he fought last time, but it may not have been disclosed. If you go to the Wikipedia page, if it was disclosed, it'll be there. So
here we go. He was. Greg Hardy was paid $10,000 to show, and $3,500 for his the Reebok sponsorship.
Yeah, the Reebok sponsorship's always going to be trash for people entering the UFC, but yeah, that's a lot cheaper than I realized, huh?
Yeah,
I would have thought, like you said, 6 digits, but he's barely pulling 5. Yeah, that's something. I'm sure he'll make his money when he needs to. Maybe he just wanted to be in the UFC. You know what I mean? The biggest show possible. I'm not sure.
He's got to work his way from the bottom. Well, let's jump back to the middleweight title picture. So
Okay.
Jacare said in an interview that he is going to be given a title shot after this fight. What he's going to face, he didn't say specifically, but I assume he's going to face the winner of the presumed fight of Robert Whitaker and Israel Adesanya. So that's what he claims, but a lot can change between now and then. But what do you make of that? Do you think Jacare can maybe possibly leapfrog Israel? Could you see that happening? And maybe get the Whitaker fight? I doubt it with the whole New Zealand Australian thing they're trying to have going there with Whitaker and Israel Adesanya. But do you think it's possible?
I think this is the difference between middleweight and lightweight. Because at lightweight, we're talking about McGregor jumping the interim champion for a title shot. We're talking about Tony Ferguson jumping the interim champion for a title shot. And middleweight, I don't see it happening. I think they stick to their the more reasonable approach to resolving the two champion issue. They're going to have a unification fight. Like you said, it makes too much sense. The thing with Jacare is I think, is going to be willing to wait it out. He's going to take this fight, see what happens there. Maybe somebody gets injured and pulls out, either Israel Adesanya or Whitaker, or he'll just fight the winner. The issue with that is we've seen in the past, I think Damian Maia might have been somebody this happened to, where they get promised a title shot, they wait, and then the UFC's like, well, we were going to give you a title shot, but there's this other contender that we just saw that we like way more to have a title shot. So sorry, dude, we never signed a paper. Like, is a Dana White verbal promise is not the most reassuring contract. So yeah, no, I it's great for Jacare. I think that stepping up on short notice and taking big fights is extremely risky to fighters' careers when they're vying for a title shot. So props to him, and I'm glad that Dana White did say something, but don't believe his lies. Dana White's a liar. For money. He's not lying just to, screw people over. He just, when the dollar bills are in front of him, he's going to be like, yep, sorry, that was not right. We actually want to make more money doing this other thing. So we'll see how it plays out.
I do like what Jacare was doing there. He's really worked on his English. If you get a chance to listen to the interview, he's still, he's still kind of broken and his accent's very heavy, but it's very clear. You can clearly understand what he's saying, and he's got a point across. So he's putting himself out there. He's saying a fight. That's one thing you got to admire too, is that he's putting himself there, and he's not just saying I'm gonna fight whoever. He's saying I'm gonna fight for the title next. Whether Dana White actually told him that or not, he's putting himself out there, and he's getting people talking about him. We're talking about it right now. MMA media is talking about it, so I think it's good. He came a long way, right? From barely speaking any English, and now he's out there promoting his fight. So I admire it, because some Brazilian fighters are just comfortable not speaking any English and just fighting on mid spots on the card and just collecting a paycheck. But Jacare's going for it. He's going for that big fight. So I admire it.
Yeah, and he's always been a guy whose highlights, should speak for themselves. If promotion was purely based on highlights, he'd be one of the biggest stars of the sport. He's so scary, and his crocodile crawl celebrations, one of the coolest in the sport. Yeah, I mean he's definitely a great package. So it's definitely beneficial that he's picking up that English. I think even in terms of long term, parlaying his success in the UFC into a career after, whether it be as like a commentator for Brazil or something like that, just being able to interact with the American audience opens up a lot of doors. Yeah, it's cool. I'm happy for the guy.
And why do you think it is that people look at Damian Maia and they're like, okay, Damian Maia is like, the best jiu-jitsu practitioner in the UFC. A lot of people say that. But Jacare is a black belt as well. Legitimate black belt. He's a badass. And is it his stand-up game, you think? Is his willingness to strike with opponents that he doesn't kind of get the respect from fans and media that he deserves on the ground?
I would say that's accurate. I think Damian Maia has implemented his grappling game a lot more in MMA, mostly because of the wrestling. Damian Maia's wrestling has been, especially since his move down to welterweight, but even before that, a lot more impactful than Jacare's. And part of that is that Jacare is a lot more willing to just stand there and trade with guys. So I think that's a great point. It's just I think purely volume of exposure. We just, every time it goes to the ground with Jacare, he finishes him pretty quick, and most of the fight takes the place on the feet. But if you go back, Jacare has a submission win over Marcelo Garcia, who's considered, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu competitors ever. And he won that via Kimura. I think he busted up the dude's shoulder too. So one of the most impressive resumes in grappling. I think probably more successful than Damian Maia in grappling. If I had to guess, I'd have to look at it first. I mean, they're both very, very accomplished in that side of competition. But yeah, I think that's a great point that Jacare, being the more rounded fighter, actually takes away from his notoriety, because sometimes there's something really cool about a specialist like Damian Maia. And Jacare, he could be a specialist, but he's good at striking and he loves it apparently. So yeah, it's interesting.
And it's definitely afforded him more opportunities to make more money. I mean, there's a reason why the UFC is going to call on him at any chance they can, because he's going to create an exciting fight. So I mean, Damian Maia, not so much. You know what you're going to get with Damian Maia. He's going to try to get the fight to the ground. So, but with Jacare, he's going to have an exciting fight with no matter who is in there. But let's get on with the card. Let's talk about the rest of the card, man. I know your boy Mike Perry, your boy Platinum. He's fighting Cowboy Oliveira. Oliveira's on a hot streak right now. What are you thinking? Who do you like in this one? Well, Oliveira was on a bit of a hot streak. I'm sorry that he lost to Gunnar Nelson, but
you know why they call him Platinum, Mike Perry, right?
Right. Why?
Because if they were to build a satellite to God, they'd make it out of platinum.
Yep, of course.
Yeah, man, I'm surprised we haven't been hearing more from him. Maybe he's kind of taking it easy on the promotion thing right now. I think sometimes guys get a little burnt out, but you put a microphone in front of him and you're going to get gold. He's hilarious. He comes off as like kind of like not smart, but he's very obviously quick-witted and clever, and he plays his character very well. He knows what he looks like to people with the face tattoos and everything, the mohawk, the chicken dances, whatever it is. Yeah, I love it, dude. He's had a tough go of it lately, Mike Perry has. He had a nice win over Paul Felder, which now is looking even better every day as Paul Felder continues to succeed in the sport. But he has a hell of a test in front of him with Alex Oliveira. Cowboy Oliveira, yeah, he lost to Gunnar Nelson, but that was in my opinion, a tactical problem. I think that on the feet, Alex Oliveira was actually doing very well with Gunnar Nelson, and as you said, he's been doing very well as of late. He's a guy who used to do that crazy weight cut. He would go down to lightweight and miss weight by 5 pounds, 6 pounds. He's really settled into the 170-pound division. I think that if he was smart, this fight, he would take it to the ground. But I think that, like we said, he's not maybe the best tactician. And so this matchup, I really like Mike Perry. I think he's going to pull it off. I think his power in a fight where there's going to be a lot of punches exchanged, and his chin, he has a very good chin. That's one thing that people don't really talk about, is he can eat some damage being young and fresh, and he's got a big old head, which helps. So yeah, I like Mike Perry in this fight. I think he's got a good chance at taking the knockout win.
Yeah, so bet the house on Mike Perry. You heard it here.
Everything you got.
Everything you own, bet on Mike Perry. He's going to win, 100% guarantee. Fact, you heard it here.
Yeah. If Mike Perry doesn't win, I'm going to get a face tattoo, Cowboy Oliveira, right across.
Don't do that, though. Don't bet. This fight is too close to call, I think. I wouldn't put money on this one.
You should never bet on anything. It's risky.
Yeah, it's too risky. Well, I mean, if you were going to bet, I don't know. I don't know if I would. I don't know. This would probably be the one that I would stay away from, personally. Yeah, I mean, do you think that this fight has implications? Like, do you think a win here means a lot for either guy? I mean, both guys are coming off losses. I assume they're one more win away from making real waves in the welterweight division. Wouldn't you agree?
Mike Perry recently re-signed, I think 5 fights or something like that with the UFC. They definitely have big plans for him, and this is a great kind of platform fight. He's got to string some stuff together to have the fans believe in him, especially when you get a lot of attention and then you don't deliver with the results. People are very quick to kind of ridicule you, even though he's shown a ton of potential. He's very, very young. He came from a gym without a lot of, you know how iron sharpens iron? He was iron, and he was dealing with some wood blocks. I mean, there wasn't a lot there for him. He's moved to Greg Jackson's gym. I don't know if that's where he trained for this fight, but we saw leaps he was making while training there. He looked a lot more like your typical prospect that moves well, that uses like kind of this new approach to MMA where you're kind of light on your feet and you're mixing up the different threats, different kicks, different techniques that are emerging, like those calf kicks and stuff. So yeah, I really think that this is an opportunity for either guy to show that they have potential to become somebody that they're not right now. right? The way people look at him right now isn't elite fighters, and I think if they can win this fight in dominant fashion for either Cowboy Oliveira or Mike Perry, it's gonna do a lot towards building that because they're both super tough dudes, but it's gonna, in my best guess is that it's going to be a bloody fight. Like it's gonna be a violent one. People are gonna be watching it and they're gonna like it, and so they're gonna remember it. And that's with somebody like Mike Perry. If he can have a performance that matches his promotional ability, it's gonna do big things for him. So
Yeah, this is a serious fight of the night contender. This is definitely one that you want to be glued to the TV for. Would you agree?
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's always the possibility that, Cowboy Oliveira tries to wrestle him or something. We don't ever want to say a guaranteed knockout fight of the night, the Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou situation. But yeah, I think on paper, you look at it, a lot of great fights on this card, a lot of like stand and bang kind of just bleed type fights. But this is the Grand Coupa. This is the big one. This is violence from start to finish on paper. So I like it a lot. I can't wait till this fight happens.
Yes, sir. Okay, well let's look at John Lineker and Corey Sandhagen. Now the bantamweight division is really been hit hard with T.J. Dillashaw's situation. Now Cejudo and Mariah are gonna fight for the title, kind of hopefully sort some things out. But do you think that maybe Sandhagen's unranked? He's a relative newcomer. John Lineker's been around. He's been around for quite some time. Do you think that if Sandhagen gets a big win here, do you think he can instantly catapult up his way up into the title picture?
Yeah, Lineker's one of the more well-known little guys, the 135 and under. There's only a handful of them that really, that every time they fight, people are kind of like, oh, he's on the card. Oh, great. That's awesome. And he did it by knocking people out in a division where nobody really like you see knockouts at 135 and at 125, but you don't see one fighter knocking everybody out that they fight. And Lineker basically did that. I mean, he's fought some very, very tough dudes because he made a name for himself with these awesome knockouts. And he knocked out some very talented fighters too, not just, bums off the street like somebody else on this card. But Corey Sandhagen is a monster, dude. He's huge. He's going to be much taller than Lineker. And like you said, he's the one that is the prospect that has this potential push to the next echelon, whereas Lineker is kind of a more known commodity. I think that Lineker would love nothing more than knocking Sandhagen out and ending the hype train. He's done that to a couple other fighters. You could see a big old smile on his face every time he starts punching people. He loves it. So it's a cool fight, and it's a great test for Sandhagen because we've seen he has a great dynamic jiu-jitsu game. We've seen he's long. He's pretty quick for his size in the division, but you got to be able to hang with, the better strikers, and Lineker's going to test that for sure. He's got to have his defense on point, or he's going to be taking a nap. Lineker puts people out.
Yeah, Lineker, he's won. Let's see, he's won 1, 2, 3. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights by TKO, and then his most recent fight against Mario Batista was a submission. So I don't know. This is one that maybe a lot of people that are not like us that pay attention to the sport on a regular basis might look at and like, I don't know if I want to, like, I don't know if that fight really intrigues me, but this fight could be a war. This is another one that could be fight of the night potential.
Absolutely. And Sandhagen, for his build, these lankier guys, sometimes you think of them as kind of they're just to try to outpoint their opponent, use their reach, score points. He's aggressive. He's going to go out there and he's going to bring the fight to him, which is kind of scary, but also kind of exciting. So you're right. There is another fight of the night potential. It is an awesome fight. I hope you're screaming your head off or whatever you're doing at the time. Yeah, it's going to be a good
Depends
one. I
on
think.
how many beers in I am by the time this fight happens. I'll be there all day, so
You'll be what, 10 fights in? So yeah.
10 fights in. I mean, I'm getting there at like 2 o'clock for the meet and greet. I'll probably be, I don't know where I'll be by the time this one.
Sailing.
Yeah, by the time this one gets on. Let's see. Let's talk about Glover Teixeira. He's back. He's fighting Ion
Cutelaba.
Cutelaba. Yes, Ion Cutelaba. I don't know a lot about Ion Cutelaba. Is he a prospect to watch, or do you think he's somebody that is being fed to Glover, quote unquote, for Glover to get a win and look good?
I think of, when I see Ion Cutelaba, I think of like a just like a Humvee or something. You know, this super huge vehicle, just like stacked, built. But it has one problem, and it's the transmission, and it's stuck in drive because all it can do is move forward. He's just an angry, huge, mean dude who wants to hit somebody, and that's intimidating, and that could be very effective. But against a wily veteran like Glover Teixeira, it's a very interesting situation because Glover Teixeira he's up there in years. His chin at light heavyweight, if he's getting hit, I mean, good luck eating too many punches from somebody like Kutalaba. But he's got that craftiness that's going for him. His boxing has always been, technically one of the better. He's had some of the more technical boxing in the light heavyweight division, very effective with it. And of course, his ground game, his jiu-jitsu is, I wouldn't say second to none, but we got Jacare on this card. So it's up there. It's one of the best ground games in the sport. So it's a huge test for Ian Cutelaba. I think he's even probably an underdog, but it's a huge opportunity as well because Glover Teixeira is the more known name. And the way Cutelaba fights, if he can move forward and knock Glover Teixeira out, I mean, we saw when Rumble knocked Teixeira out, how hyped people were for that. This is a potential for the same thing. So it's once again, another really awesome matchup. And stylistically, I think it's one of the more intriguing ones.
All right, they call Ion Cutelaba the Hulk, so I think that tells you everything you need to know about this guy. Like you said, he's just big and angry, and he is on a 2-fight win streak, and both ended in the first round by knockout, so no surprise there. He's been in the UFC for a little bit. This is his 6th fight in the organization. I don't know if he's ranked. I don't believe he is, but he will be ranked if he's not. If he does defeat Glover Teixeira. I mean, who do you like in this one? Do you think the Hulk will be able to get the win here, or do you like Glover?
I think I like Glover. I think that the ground game will be the difference. Glover Teixeira is kind of sneaky good with his wrestling. I think he's going to be able to use his good boxing kind of defensively, right? Throwing out punches here and there that Cutelaba has to worry about. And then once he's worrying about him, I think he shoots in, gets a takedown. And I would, the last fight, I called it. I said Glover Teixeira via arm triangle submission. That's how it happened. I'm saying it again, man. Another arm triangle submission win for Glover Teixeira. That's my official prediction.
You heard it here first. Did you give a prediction for Lineker and Sandhagen?
I didn't give a prediction. That's a tough one to call, man. I'll say Sandhagen. I think Lineker is a huge threat, but I think the height difference, the reach difference, and just Sandhagen's kind of youth, but also youthful like energy. Like he has that confidence where he's too confident. I'm not too confident for his own good. It's that he's overly confident, and it is good for him. It helps him perform at a higher level than if he maybe fought a little more reserved. And sometimes you need that extra kind of psychosis, almost you would call it, where he's going to try whatever he wants to try. And I think that's going to be very effective against somebody like Lineker.
Yeah, but I know you're picking your boy Mike Perry. Don't even have to ask that one. But as we're kind of winding down here, let's look at the prelims, the ESPN2 prelims. The early prelims are going to be on ESPN2, and then the prelims are going to be on ESPN. It's kind of an odd setup, but are there any fights on there that you want to highlight, that you want to talk about? I mean, we got Andrei Arlovsky returning, but I mean, outside of that, Angela Hill is on the card, Jim Miller's coming back. Who are you highlighting here?
Eventually, we're going to have to get this graphic that pops up at a certain time during the show where Prospect Watch. Watch time, guys. Roosevelt Roberts, undefeated in his last fight. He had one of the nastiest guillotines I'd ever seen, where he had the guy's neck right in the guillotine, and the guy was trying to escape it, and he was backed up against the cage. The guy was like horizontal as he's choking him out. It was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And he's not like the thickest guy ever. He's long, lanky. It's that kind of new athlete we've seen have a lot of success. Those kind of Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series type prospects where physically you're like, man, this guy could do a lot, and he's been performing very well. So this fight he has here, Thomas Gifford. Yep. I don't know anything about Gifford, so I don't want to make any exaggerate promises about how dominant he's going to be. But I think the fact that I don't know anything about Gifford, and from what I've seen from Roberts, I think this fight's made for him to win, and I'm really excited for what he's going to bring to the lightweight division. He's a super interesting prospect. So, yeah, that's definitely a fight I'd want to highlight right there.
Yes, sir. Are there any others? I mean, that we know Roosevelt Roberts is our prospect, but are you at all excited for Arlovsky and Augusto Sakai?
I'm not the biggest Andrei Arlovsky fan. It's kind of weird. He used to get knocked out a lot, and then he came back and he had a really great chin. But he
I
kind
wonder how
of
he came back, huh?
no, come on now, with no proof. But he hasn't. Just I always get bored in his fights, and I don't know what it is because they're heavyweights and should be exciting. But I think he just kind of moves in and out really effectively and kind of outpoints people. I don't know much about the Sakai guy. It's always kind of interesting to see new heavyweights, see what they kind of bring physically because it's a very physically driven division and there's different kinds of athletes entering the sport. I know he's fighting out of Brazil. I don't know if he's maybe half Japanese or something like that. I'll have to find out more about this guy, but yeah, not terribly excited. I don't look at Andrei Arlovsky as somebody who's going to make one of those Alistair Overeem, Junior Dos Santos runs at this point. But if he is, this is a good starting point. I'm sure I'll watch. I mean, it's similar to Ben Saunders, though, where he's a name. We know him. It's kind of cool that he's fighting. He has some interesting things, but at the end of the day, pretty inconsequential relative to some of the other fights on the card.
Yes, sir. Okay, well,
There
uh,
is. I got one. I got
yeah.
one more. It's Gilbert Burns, who I've been every time he fights, my takeaway is like, man, I love watching this guy fight, which is a great thing as a fighter. He's got dynamic submissions and dynamic striking power, and he's fallen in love with the striking game coming from a grappling base. Great athleticism. Mike Davis, the guy he's fighting, is also like a known commodity. We know he's pretty good. I believe he fought Zabit, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, I'm thinking of somebody else. But he has fought. I think he's fought in the UFC before. Maybe I'm confusing him with somebody else. I am. I'm always thinking of somebody else. But Gilbert Burns, that's on the early prelims. That's one to watch. He's always trying to put on a show for the fans, so keep an eye on him.
Yes, sir. Okay, last piece of business. I forgot about this headline as we were talking about some of the news and upcoming fights. Uh, Anthony Pettis has been called out by uprising welterweight Santiago Ponzinibbio. I think we talked about Santiago not maybe a while back, but we did talk about him, and we were saying that he needs to call somebody out. He's been saying I want a top fight, but never said a name. He's like, just give me a fight, I'll show up. So he's calling out one of the maybe the hottest guy right now in the welterweight division aside from the champ, coming off a big knockout over Wonderboy Thompson. He's one of the biggest stars in the UFC already. Anthony Pettis is. Do you think that Santiago, if this fight were to happen, this would kind of be the win that Santiago needs, right, to jump right into the forefront of the welterweight division and really get his name out there?
I think it's a great step towards it. I think it's not that the super marquee win only because Pettis isn't. I mean, yeah, obviously getting a knockout win against Wonderboy, that you passed a certain test there, and it was a very tough test. And it's great for Anthony Pettis' standing at welterweight, but it was his only fight at welterweight. And honestly, I don't even know if Pettis really wants to stay at welterweight. He originally said he wouldn't. Then you beat Wonderboy, and all of a sudden things kind of change for you, I'm sure. Um, yeah, I think it from Ponzinibbio's point of view makes a ton of sense. Like you said, the name value on Anthony Pettis is almost second to none, especially in terms of name value versus how challenging you kind of see the fight being for him. Pettis is a super dangerous fighter. His submissions, his striking, his overall skill set's hard to match. It's hard to train for him because he can do things nobody else can. But we've seen kind of the way to beat him. We've seen him lose fights pretty cleanly. And I think there's a lot of film for Ponzinibbio to study and say, like, okay, I can beat this guy. And his coaches can break it down and be like, okay, this is a guy you can beat, and he's a huge name. So very safe call out, but also very high reward. It was a smart move. I liked it. I liked it as a call out. I just don't know if I really think Pettis is going to be into it because Ponzinibbio is so dangerous. He's a large welterweight. He's going to be much taller than Anthony Pettis, and also just the fanfare behind Ponzinibbio isn't quite there outside of the hardcore fans. Hardcore fans know about Ponzinibbio at this point. We've seen what he can do. A lot of people don't like him because he's eye poked some fan favorites, Gunnar Nelson. But he is a rising star. So I think it's a dangerous fight for Pettis. I don't think he's going to want to do it. But if it happens, like we said, I'm going to get the popcorn ready, man. That's a hell of a fight. It's a good one. So I like the call out a lot.
Yeah, Ponzinibbio said that come fight a real welterweight, Very, very intriguing calling Wonder Boy a fake welterweight. I don't know if that's the smartest thing to do in the world, but he did say, if you fight me, you won't get lucky. So yeah, I mean, I guess if it were to happen, I'd be all for it. Like you said, get the popcorn out. But Positivio does have opened the potential to tap into a big market that is Argentina, that really isn't all that known for MMA or any kind of martial arts, but they're very close to Brazil. Positivio actually, I believe, trained in Brazil because he speaks Portuguese too. But the potential there to tap into another market, I think, is something the UFC should look into. What did you think?
Oh, 100. Well, I think 100% it's possible. I think that the people of Argentina are behind him. As far as anybody is aware of mixed martial arts, they're aware of Ponzinibbio. You guys probably know, a lot of people who view the stream, that I play UFC 3 on Twitch, and you get people from all over coming by, say hi, and every time there's somebody from Argentina, they ask me about Ponzinibbio. What do you think of Ponzinibbio? Do you think he'd be champion? Do you like Ponzinibbio? Ponzinibbio. And I love the guy. He's awesome. If you're going to bring a fan base into the sport, he's one of the best people to do it. He's super exciting to watch fight. He doesn't put on dull fights. And I can't say a lot about his personality because it's hard to get the exposure with the language gap and stuff. But from what I've seen, he does seem like a pretty fan-friendly fighter. So, yeah, I think that they definitely could invest something into him. I don't know why they really haven't yet. I mean, they have a little bit, but maybe it's the eye pokes with the Gunnar Nelson fight, or maybe it's just not thinking he is the top talent. I'm not sure, but he's a star in the making, in my opinion, is if they can bring in that Argentina population.
And win or lose, I think a fight with Pettis would make him a bigger star than he ever was before. Um, but there I don't. Just gotta use an analogy. Do you know who Manu Ginobili is? You ever heard of him?
Yeah, he's that dude who killed a bat the one time, right?
I don't know. Did he? Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I know Manu Ginobili. Yeah,
Yeah, he brought a big market over for the NBA. Wherever he goes, wherever the Spurs would play, Argentinian fans would travel, or if they lived there, they would come out in droves. Argentina is a very proud country, so they support their guys. So it is interesting why they haven't put a larger backing behind Ponzinibbio, but hopefully they will. And curious to see what happens with him and Pettis moving forward, because there really is nothing for Santiago, and we still don't know what Pettis is going to do. I think he should stay at welterweight. I don't know what else he can really do at lightweight, but that's another
I
discussion.
think.
Go ahead.
Well, we can have a longer discussion about it, but I think he's a very unique situation where he's kind of burned out at lightweight, which was probably his best division, but it's also a very deep division. I think he's just looking for fun fights, exciting fights. People like Justin Gaethje, except for Justin Gaethje is going to be vying for a title, so that's maybe a little out of his grasp, maybe. But I think it's also fun fights, but also big name fights. So it's going to be, I think, less about the division, lightweight or welterweight, and more about the name. And I just don't know if Ponzinibbio is the right name.
Right. Yeah, I mean, maybe we could see him fight. Like, if Cowboy gets knocked off by Al Quinta, he could fight Cowboy. Oh, there's some interesting options out there for him. But yeah, man, I think we're out of time. Anything else you wanna talk about? You wanna throw out there?
Man, I feel like we're just scratching the surface. This card is awesome. Even the Russia card, I felt like we didn't, but we could just sit here all day if we were going to do that. We'd have a 10-hour podcast if we wanted to get to everything we're talking about. Man, I had a blast. I'm so excited for you. I went to one UFC card. It was unforgettable, except for, the liquor. I forgot some things. But it's an awesome experience. I'd recommend it to anyone. I can't wait to hear what you take away from it. I'll be watching. Yeah, man, I had a great time. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, thank you for doing this as always. You're the glue to this show, man. You're the expert. You're the PhD, as we like to say.
It's not a real PhD though, no.
Well, if you want to plug anything, go for it.
Yeah, we mentioned the Twitch channel. I would say 95% chance I'm doing the Fight Companion this Saturday. I got my personal life's a little crazy right now. I'm finishing up law school in a week and a half. But yeah, guys, check out twitch.tv/LuberLibre. Saturday, we will be watching Bellator, watching UFC, talking fights, having a good time. How about you?
Yes, sir. As always, subscribe to the YouTube channel. check out the show. Wrestlingwithheat.podbean.com is the website. Available on iTunes, Spotify, etc. You name it, it's on there. So yeah, thank you again for doing this, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Yeah, guys, smash that subscribe button like Khabib.